Is the Ja Morant investigation over? We're just waiting for the finals to be over to announce the decision?
The latter. We are waiting for the finals to be over. I'm aware, of course, of these reports on social media about whether the gun was in fact a gun, and so we haven't completely wrapped it up.
Does that
Be
matter,
honest,
Commissioner, if that's a toy gun?
it's interesting. It's the very issue is for Ja, certainly in the first incident, was treating a gun as a toy. I mean, that's what we're talking about. And that's what I think the danger is to society, taking a gun, live streaming it. This is without getting into gun issues in terms of the propriety of owning guns and the use of guns. I think everyone agrees that gun safety is critically important and that guns aren't toys. So it's something that I'm thinking a lot about because, again, I'm not going to get into the specifics of the investigation, but in fact, if you are live streaming something that to the world looks exactly like a gun and in a frankly reckless manner, should it matter whether or not it's a real gun? I mean, I will say at the end of the day, in terms of doing my job, everything that's presented to us is relevant. Past conduct is relevant. The circumstances in which you're doing whatever the act is becomes relevant. And in this case, obviously we're going to take into account whatever's presented to us.
When we heard from you after what happened with Ja this second time around, it's almost like there was disappointment. Like you were let down by Ja Morant. Is that a fair assessment?
It is. And Joe Dumars, who now runs basketball operations to the league, and I have talked a lot about it because we were both in the meeting with him. The head of the Players Association, Tamika Tremalio, was in the meeting with us. And just honestly, my sense was he was very sincere in how contrite he was, in how serious he was taking the issue. Again, now talking about the first incident where there's no fact in dispute. He was holding a gun, inebriated in a club, waving it, live streaming it. So that's the first go round. And I know Ja a bit. I had known him. He's a star in our league. And the sense was he came in, he fully owned it, was saying, I made a terrible mistake. Learned from the mistake. And so then to get the report and then to see online that, in fact, he was then live streaming a gun, certainly looks like a gun, a Glock, in a kind of reckless manner. Sure, I was incredibly disappointed.
What would be a big suspension?
I'm not going to get into precise number of games, but I will only say in response to people who say 8 wasn't enough the first time around, it felt like a pretty severe punishment at the time, an 8-game suspension, of course, without pay. And so I will say, and I said this before, in terms of impacting his behavior, would 12 games have made a difference the first time, 15 games? I really don't know. I also, the older I get, I realize that I can't control other people and that he has to own his own conduct. And regardless of the number of games he had been suspended for first time around, he owns this, not me. And he has to take responsibility for it. And part of this, it's fine for somebody to come in and take responsibility for their action. And I'll even give him the benefit of the doubt that he was sincere. He's now made this mistake again. And I think one of the things we even talked about then is nobody's naive in the league office, certainly not Joe Dumars, been at this a long time, was, we'll see as you go back out into the world, how you choose to comport yourself. And so now here we are again, dealing with an issue around Ja. And I also think it's important to point out that this is not about just discipline and then we'll just cross our fingers and then hope there's not a third time. I recognize that he needs some assistance, from the league office, his union, his team. He's no doubt he's a remarkable player, and I think he's a very engaging young man. It's one of the reasons he has this enormous following on social media. But it's a two-edged sword, and he has to own that and take responsibility for it. And my hope is that wherever we come out in terms of discipline, that there's a an acceptance that we need to find ways to engage with each other going forward so he can change the trajectory he's now on, which is not a positive one.
And I wondered about that, Commissioner, that I was worried about him over the summer. Now we've had this second incident. And also, if you suspend somebody for 20 or 30 or 40 games, what happens to that person when they have all that free time? And you could be adding to the issue with Ja Morant, not subtracting.
Precisely. And I'm worried about that too. And so, again, putting aside the number of games that we may be looking at, I'd like to come up with a program, and frankly, working with him, in which there is a joint sense, a mutual commitment that we need to put together a program, not something that's a couple of sessions and I'm back, but something that where he will be able to use time away from the game. Look, he's suspended right now. I mean, he's away. It's the off season, but he's suspended from team activities, and there. I want to find a way where, frankly, he's not being kicked to the curb, but basketball will take a back seat. And first and foremost, we're going to focus on him as a young man developing as a better person, as someone who's more responsible, particularly when it comes to guns. I mean, this is a really serious issue.